Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving, in which case please keep them open, and picture a specific date. October 4, 1997. We're in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a Saturday evening. The air is probably getting that crisp early fall feel to it.
Right, a quiet night.
Presumably a very quiet night in the suburbs. But inside the regional office vault of Loomis Fargo & Co., something absolutely massive is taking place.
And when you say massive, that's not an exaggeration.
Not at all. I'm talking about a quantity of cash that is almost difficult for the human brain to visualize properly. We are talking about $17.3 million.
It is a staggering amount.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, at that specific moment in time, October 1997, this was the second largest cash robbery on United States soil.
The second largest.
It wasn't just a theft. It was a logistical anomaly.
Yeah.
When you get into numbers that big, you stop talking about money in the sense of, wallet cash.
Right.
And you start talking about tonnage. You start talking about cubic feet.
Exactly. And that's the hook here. You hear $17 million heist, and where does your mind go? You probably imagine a team of high-tech operatives, right?
Oh, absolutely. Lasers, someone hanging from the ceiling on a wire.
Mission Impossible style, yeah. You imagine a level of sophistication that matches the payout. You think of a mastermind sitting in a dark room with blueprints, timing security cameras down to the millisecond.
But that is the central paradox of this story. The planning and execution, and certainly the chaotic aftermath, were anything but sophisticated.
Anything but.
In fact, the media later dubbed this the Hillbilly Heist. It's a nickname that stuck because it really captured the public's imagination.
This idea that, regular, perhaps unsophisticated people stumbled into a fortune.
And then had absolutely no idea what to do with it.
Which is such a brutal nickname, honestly. It feels a little mean-spirited, but then we get into the details and you start to see why it happened.
Yeah, you do.
The central tension we are going to explore today is exactly that. How do you pull off a heist of this historic magnitude, literally changing the record books, while simultaneously making some of the most bafflingly bad decisions in the history of crime?
It really is a perfect case study in the gap between the act of stealing and the act of getting away with it. Those are two very different skill sets.
Very different.
One requires access, nerve, and maybe a little bit of brute force. The other requires patience, discipline, complex financial knowledge, and the ability to delay gratification.
And our subjects today.
Our subjects today had the access, but they completely, utterly lacked the discipline.
So in this deep dive, we are going to unpack not just how the money was physically moved, which is a comedy of errors in itself involving actual physical limitation.
Oh, yeah, we have to talk about the weight of the cash.
We will. But we're also digging into the wild, chaotic aftermath. We're talking extravagant spending that defies logic, betrayals that seem inevitable in hindsight, and even a murder-for-hire plot.
It plays out less like a slick thriller and more like a dark comedy where everything that can possibly go wrong does.
And just to set the ground rules for our discussion today, we are building this narrative strictly on the factual records of the investigation, the court outcomes, and the media reports surrounding the 1997 Loomis Fargo robbery.
Right. We're going to look at the mechanics, the psychology of the insider, and the systemic failures that, frankly, allowed this to happen.
Because a vault shouldn't be this easy to empty.
It really shouldn't.
So let's jump into Section 1, the context and the company. Because to understand how $17 million walks out the door, you have to understand where it was sitting. We're talking about Loomis Fargo & Co.
Right, and Loomis Fargo itself was actually a very new entity at the time of the robbery. It was created in 1997, the very same year this heist took place.
The same year. That feels significant.
It's hugely significant. It was a massive consolidation of two giants, Wells Fargo Armored Service and Loomis Armored Inc.
So you have a massive merger happening right before the robbery. Now, when I hear merger, I just think of corporate buzzwords, maybe some new letterhead. Why does a merger make a bank vault easier to rob?
Well, it's way more than letterhead. Think about it like a bad marriage where two families move into one house, but nobody decides who holds the front door key.
Okay.
In 1997, you had Wells Fargo Armored and Loomis Armored smashing together. You had two different corporate cultures.
Different ways of doing things.
Two different sets of security protocols. And critically, two different computer systems that probably don't talk to each other very well.
So chaos.
Absolute operational chaos.
Yeah.
You have security managers from Company A who don't know the drivers from Company B. You have policies that are in flux.
Right. So the old way of doing things is gone, but the new way isn't really established yet.
Exactly. Maybe the old Wells Fargo way of checking out a vehicle is different from the Loomis way, so for a few months, nobody really knows which rule book to follow. It creates what you could call an accountability vacuum.
An accountability vacuum.
Does
I
it?
like that. So the social fabric of the security, the I know you, I'm watching you element, is completely broken.
It's shredded.
Yeah.
If a procedure isn't followed, you can just blame it on the new rules or the transition confusion. And in that specific window of time, David Ghantt wasn't just a supervisor.
He was a supervisor that nobody was really watching.
Because everyone was too busy trying to figure out their own job security or navigate the new org chart, the whole system was distracted.
That makes a lot of sense. And you have to remember, in the late 90s, the sheer volume of physical cash moving through the system is different from today.
Well, that's a completely different world.
We swipe cards or tap phones now. Back then, ATMs needed constant refilling with physical bills. Banks had huge cash reserves on site.
That's a great point. This is a cash-heavy world.
Yeah.
And this wasn't the first time Loomis had been hit that year, right?
No, and that is a critical piece of context. Just 7 months prior, on March 29th, 1997, there was another robbery in Jacksonville, Florida.
Another insider job.
Exactly. An armored vehicle driver named Philip Noel Johnson. He stole $18.8 million.
$18.8 million. So the Charlotte heist we are discussing today was actually the second largest because it happened right on the heels of the first one.
Which is just wild to think about. Two massive, record-breaking heists in 1 year for the same newly merged entity.
It creates this atmosphere where armored car theft isn't just a theoretical risk, it's a headline reality. The industry was already on edge, or at least it should have been.
Hitting to so.
You have these massive amounts of liquidity sitting in vaults or moving in trucks, and the precedent had been set that an insider could compromise the system. It suggests a deep systemic vulnerability in the industry at that time.
A vulnerability that our cast of characters was about to exploit.
Yes. Let's talk about them.
Section 2, the cast of characters. Because every heist story needs its players, and this one has quite the lineup. It all starts with the man on the inside, David Scott Ghantt.
David Ghantt was the vault supervisor. That title is so important. He wasn't just a driver. He was the person responsible for the secure area where all that cash was stored.
He held the keys to the kingdom.
Literally.
Oh.
He was born in 1969, so he was 28 years old at the time of the robbery. A young guy, really.
And from what we know, his personal life was, well, complicated is a polite way to put it. Unhappy might be the better word.
Unhappy and trapped seemed to be the consensus from the reporting. He was married, but the evidence suggests he was already planning an exit strategy from that marriage.
He felt stuck.
Stuck, underpaid, overworked, unappreciated. And that is a dangerous psychological profile for someone who is guarding millions and millions of dollars every single day.
We see that a lot in white-collar crime, right? It's this grievance theory. I deserve this because the world hasn't treated me right. My boss doesn't respect me. My job is a dead end.
Precisely. It allows for a kind of moral justification. In his mind, he isn't just stealing, he's leveling the playing field. He's taking what he's owed.
And when investigators later found his abandoned pickup truck at the warehouse, his wedding ring was left inside.
That's such a powerful detail.
It's a fairly unambiguous statement of intent, isn't it? It signals that he wasn't just leaving his job, he was shedding his entire identity.
David Ghantt, the husband, is dead. David Ghantt, the millionaire, is born. It's cinematic.
But he wasn't acting alone. He had a connection, a motivation, and that brings us to Kelly Campbell.
Kelly Campbell is the bridge in this story. She's the catalyst. She was a former co-worker at Loomis. She and Ghantt had struck up a relationship while working together.
A workplace romance.
Seems to be the case. And even after she left the company, they stayed in contact. She represents the emotional lever that was used to move Ghantt from a disgruntled employee to an active criminal.
She knew his vulnerabilities.
Intimately. And through Kelly Campbell, we get to the third and perhaps most volatile member of this trio, Stephen Eugene Chambers.
The mastermind.
The mastermind, as he was often referred to, though I use that term very, very loosely given how things played out.
Right. It feels generous.
What's fascinating about Chambers, though, is his background. He was actually a one-time FBI informant.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me the guy planning a massive federal bank heist used to work for the feds?
Yes. The irony is just incredible, isn't it?
Right.
The man planning a federal bank crime had previously provided information to the very agency that would later hunt him down.
How does that even happen?
Chambers was an old high school friend of Kelly Campbell. He was someone she knew from her past, someone with a certain reputation.
So the dynamic is Campbell knows Ghantt, the insider with the keys.
Right.
Campbell also knows Chambers, the guy with the criminal ambitions and, I guess, the nerve to suggest something this big.
Exactly. In August of 1997, just a couple of months before the heist, Campbell connects the two. She tells Ghantt that she has a friend, Chambers, who could assist in executing a massive robbery.
And Chambers had already put the idea out there.
He had. He'd actually broached the idea of a robbery to Campbell the summer before. He had the idea, the desire for easy money, but he needed the access. Ghantt had the access. Campbell was the link.
It's the classic love and bad influence dynamic. You have Ghantt, who seems to be the one taking the massive risk. He's the one who has to physically take the money.
He's the one on camera.
He's the one on camera, the one who becomes an international fugitive. And then you have Chambers, who is sitting back saying, I have a plan.
And if we look at that plan, which brings us to Section 3, you start to see just how lopsided this arrangement was from the very beginning.
Oh, this plan.
It wasn't a partnership, it was a manipulation.
Let's break down the strategy, because on paper, this sounds terrible for Ghantt. I mean, if someone pitched this plan to me, I'd laugh in their face.
It really does defy logic.
Yeah.
The plan was as follows. Ghantt would commit the robbery inside the vault, all by himself.
Okay, step 1.
He would then immediately flee the country to Mexico. However, and this is the kicker.
Here it comes. He would leave the bulk of the cash, the $17 million plus, with Chambers in North Carolina.
So Ghantt does the crime, Ghantt goes on the run, Ghantt becomes the fugitive. But Chambers keeps the money.
That was the agreement. Chambers was supposed to hold the cash, and then he would wire money to Ghantt occasionally for living expenses.
Occasionally.
And then, once the heat was off, Ghantt would return to the U.S. and they would split the fortune.
Once the heat was off. As if the FBI just stops looking for $17 million after a few months. Oh, well, it's been 6 weeks. Let's just close the file.
That's a significant flaw in their logic, to put it mildly. In federal investigations involving bank money, the heat rarely, if ever, just turns off.
The heat never turns off.
But beyond that, just look at the leverage. Ghantt is isolating himself in a foreign country, a fugitive, completely dependent on Chambers to send him funds. He surrendered all his power the moment he handed over those bags of cash.
It's a massive leap of faith for a criminal enterprise. It implies either a huge amount of trust or a huge amount of naivety.
Or desperation. I think that's the key.
I think you're right. He wanted out so badly he didn't scrutinize the exit plan.
Exactly. Chambers offered him a fantasy. You do this one thing and you'll be free.
Yeah.
Ghantt wanted the freedom so badly, he ignored the mechanics of the trap he was walking into.
So let's go to the night of execution, October 4th, 1997. It's a Saturday. How does it go down?
It starts with clearing the deck. Ghantt was working that night, and he had a new trainee with him. He sent the trainee home early, reportedly around 6 p.m.
A calculated move.
A very calculated move to ensure he was completely alone in the facility. He effectively created a window of opportunity where no one would be looking over his shoulder.
And then the loading begins, and this is where I want to get granular on the cubes of cash thing, because we see movies where a guy tosses a duffel bag of millions over his shoulder and sprints down an alley.
Yeah, that's Hollywood physics. In reality, paper currency is heavy. It is dense linen and cotton.
Yeah.
It has real-world mass.
So what are we talking about here in terms of weight?
Okay, so the investigation revealed that approximately $11 million of the stolen amount was in $20 bills.
$20 bills. Not hundreds.
Not hundreds. 20s. Think about the volume. To get to 11 million in 20s, you are talking about 550,000 individual bills.
Wow.
The weight of that alone is staggering.
Yeah.
When you add in the rest of the cash, you are looking at a haul that weighed well over 2,000 pounds.
Wait, over a ton.
Literally a ton. Imagine moving a Honda Civic, piece by hand, into the back of a van. And he's doing this all by himself.
So he's not just loading a van. He is doing a high-intensity CrossFit workout for an hour straight in a high-stress situation.
Sweating, exhausting, manual labor. He spent over an hour hauling these cubes. They were shrink-wrapped bricks of cash.
Yeah.
From the vault to the loading dock, and then lifting them into the van.
Which explains the leftovers. This is one of the funniest parts of this story.
The leftovers?
They couldn't take it all.
They physically could not fit all the money they had accessed into the van. They ended up leaving about $3.3 million behind in the back of the van, simply because of the sheer bulk.
Imagine that. You are in the middle of a heist, adrenaline pumping, and you just have to shrug and say, well, I guess we leave this $3 million here. No room.
It speaks to the complete lack of professional foresight. A professional crew would have calculated the cubic footage and weight beforehand. They would have brought a vehicle sized for the target.
A moving truck, maybe?
Something. Here, the target overwhelmed the transport. The van's suspension was likely bottoming out, and Ghantt was probably on the verge of physical collapse.
So Ghantt gets the van loaded barely. Where does he go?
He drives to a printing business called Reynolds & Reynolds in northwest Charlotte. This was the prearranged rendezvous point. He meets up with Campbell, Chambers, and the other co-conspirators.
The handoff.
Right. They transfer the money from the armored Loomis van into private vehicles. And then, sticking to this incredibly risky plan, Ghantt takes his cut for the road. But it's not millions.
How much did he take?
He took $50,000.
$50,000 out of $17 million.
That was the limit. It was the maximum amount that could, by law, be taken across the border without further authorization. The idea was to avoid flagging customs.
A tiny bit of planning in an otherwise unplanned mess.
A tiny bit. So he takes his $50,000, gets in his car, and leaves for Cozumel, Mexico.
He leaves $17 million in a parking lot with a guy he knows through his girlfriend, takes what is essentially pocket change in this context, and flees the country.
And that single act sets the stage for everything that follows. It puts Chambers in total control of the fortune and Ghantt in a very, very precarious position.
So, Section 4. The investigation begins. The sun comes up. It's Sunday morning now. Loomis Fargo employees show up for work.
Sunday morning, yes. And they can't get in. The vault won't open because of the time locks, and more importantly, the fact that David Ghantt isn't there to open it.
That's a bad sign.
That's a very bad sign. The police are called. And because the money in that vault belonged to banks, this wasn't just a local break-in. It was technically a bank robbery.
Which makes it a federal offense.
Right. And that brings in the FBI immediately.
And as far as whodunit, this wasn't exactly an Agatha Christie novel, was it?
Not at all. It was probably one of the easier suspect identifications in FBI history. Investigators considered Ghantt the prime suspect almost instantly.
Why so fast?
Well, first, he was the only employee unaccounted for. His car was still there, but he wasn't. Second, and most damning, there were videotapes.
Of course. It's a bank vault. They record everything.
The tapes showed him, clear as day, removing cubes of cash and loading the van for over an hour. It was all there on film. It wasn't a masked intruder. It was Dave, the supervisor.
No deniability.
Zero. Then, 2 days later, they find the abandoned Loomis van with the $3.3 million still inside. They also find Gantt's pickup truck abandoned at the warehouse.
With the wedding ring inside.
With the wedding ring. So the FBI knows who did it. They know where he started. They link him very quickly to Kelly Campbell because the FBI does their homework on associates, phone records, and so on.
But linking Ghantt to Chambers, the man actually holding the money, that was the harder task initially.
That was the challenge, because Ghantt is gone. And on paper, Chambers is just a guy. He's not on the tapes. He doesn't work for the company.
He's a ghost in the machine at this point.
Exactly. But investigators were getting tips. In a town that size, when people start acting strangely, neighbors notice. They began monitoring the Chambers family. And this is where the Hillbilly Heist nickname really earns its keep.
Oh, yes.
Because while Ghantt is in Mexico trying to lay low, the team back in North Carolina is, well, they are not laying low.
Section 5, living large. This is the part that boggles the mind. You have just committed the second largest cash robbery in U.S. history. You know the FBI is looking for the money. The smart move, the only move, is to bury it in the backyard, pour concrete over it, and live on ramen noodles for 5 years.
Theoretically, yes. That is what a disciplined criminal would do. And interestingly enough, that was actually the agreement.
They talked about this.
They did. Chambers had agreed to control the spending for a year or two to avoid suspicion. He knew that sudden wealth triggers investigations. He operated under this mistaken belief that the government tracks spending habits for about a year and then just relents.
Which, again, is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the government works. The IRS never sleeps. But did he stick to his own rule?
He did not. He didn't even wait a week. The spending spree was immediate and flagrant.
So what's the first big move?
Chambers and his wife, Michelle, moved out of their mobile home in Lincoln County and into a luxury house in the wealthy Cramer Mountain section of Cramerton.
From a mobile home to a mansion, that's not a subtle transition. That's 0 to 100.
Not in the slightest. It's the kind of lifestyle upgrade that draws immediate attention from neighbors, tax authorities, and anyone paying attention. And it wasn't just the house. It was the stuff they put in the house.
Oh, we have to talk about the purchases. This is my favorite part of the source material because it really paints a picture of their taste level or lack thereof. What were they buying?
Well, they kept some furnishings from the previous owners, which included a painting of Elvis Presley on black velvet.
The Velvet Elvis, you can't make that up. It
Yeah.
perfectly encapsulates the aesthetic of the spending spree. It's almost too perfect for a movie script. It's a cliche for a reason.
It is. They also bought a BMW Z3 with cash.
Of course, with cash. Nothing says, I'm a totally legitimate, law-abiding citizen, like walking into a car dealership and dropping a bag of $20 bills for a sports car.
They also purchased a $600 cigar store Indian.
An essential piece of home decor. Clearly a priority purchase when you're a fugitive hiding millions.
And Kelly Campbell wasn't immune either. She used part of her share to buy a Toyota Sienna minivan. She paid for it in 2 large cash installments.
A minivan, the most conspicuous vehicle for a secret millionaire. Everyone is just splashing cash around town. They are practically waving red flags.
They are. But there was one specific incident at a bank that really sealed their fate, wasn't there? This is where we need to get a little technical about money laundering.
Yes. This is a critical moment for understanding how financial regulations work and how they trip the wire. It was Michelle Chambers, Stephen's wife.
Correct. She had been making frequent small deposits. This is a technique often used to avoid what's called a CTR.
Okay, let's break that down for everyone. Explain, like, I'm 5, what is a CTR?
A CTR is a currency transaction report. It was established by the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. The rule is simple. Any cash transaction over $10,000 must be reported by the bank to the IRS and FinCEN.
FinCEN being the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
Exactly. It's designed to create a paper trail for large cash movements. So if I walk in with $11,000 cash, the teller has to fill out a form that says, expert speaker just deposited this money.
Okay, so criminals try to get around it using a technique called structuring or sometimes smurfing.
Right. They break the cash down into, say, $9,000 deposits or $5,000 deposits, thinking they're outsmarting the system.
But they aren't.
No. In fact, structuring is a federal crime in itself. Even if the money was legal, let's say you sold a vintage car legally for cash. If you break up the deposit just to avoid the report, you have committed a felony.
So Michelle Chambers goes into the bank, and not only is she structuring, she explicitly asks the teller about the limit.
She got careless. And this is just, it's unbelievable. During one visit, she actually asked the bank teller, quote, how much can I deposit before you have to report it to the feds?
She asks the teller. That is literally asking, how do I commit a crime, to the person whose job it is to stop that exact crime.
It gets worse. She followed up that question by saying, don't worry, it is not drug money.
It's not drug money. I mean, technically she was telling the truth. It wasn't drug money. It was stolen bank money.
Technically true, but legally disastrous. That interaction immediately triggered what's called a suspicious activity report, or SAR.
Which is different from a CTR.
Very different. A CTR is automatic for transactions over $10. A SAR is filed by bank employees when they observe behavior that seems to indicate money laundering or other illegal activities, regardless of the amount.
And asking, how do I avoid you reporting me, is probably at the top of the list for suspicious activities.
It's the equivalent of walking into a police station and asking, exactly how fast can I drive before you turn on the siren? The teller isn't just a service worker. In the eyes of the law, they are the first line of defense against money laundering. That teller filed a SAR probably before Michelle even left the parking lot.
So the FBI is watching the spending, they're connecting the dots, they see the house, the cars, and now they have the SARs. Meanwhile, let's check in on our friend David Ghantt down in Mexico. Section 6, the betrayal. He's in Cozumel. Is he living the high life?
Initially, yes. For a short time, he was staying in a luxury hotel. He was scuba diving, parasailing, eating expensive food. He was living the fantasy that he probably daydreamed about while sitting in that vault.
But remember, he only took $50,000.
Right. And that money goes incredibly fast when you're living at a resort and have nothing else to do.
It goes very fast.
So Ghantt realized his funds were running low. He reached out to Chambers, the man sitting on the $17 million, and asked for a refill.
And what did his partner send him?
Chambers sent him $8,000.
$8,000 out of $17 million. That is insulting. It's less than a rounding error on that amount of money.
It's more than insulting. It's a clear signal of what was coming. Ghantt had to start acting poor. He had to curtail his spending.
And he's getting nervous.
He is. He even shaved off his beard to change his appearance. after a tourist at a restaurant told him he looked like the man who robbed a bank of $20 million.
He was getting recognized. He's on the news.
He was a wanted man on international news. Of course he was getting recognized. But the real danger wasn't the tourists. It was Chambers.
Chambers decides that Ghantt is a loose end.
Yes, a very expensive loose end. Chambers decided to cut ties in the most permanent way possible. He plotted a murder-for-hire scheme. He hired a hitman named Michael McKinney to go to Mexico and kill David Ghantt.
This takes the story from a clumsy, almost comedic heist to a dark, dark thriller. Chambers isn't just greedy. He's willing to kill his accomplice to keep the money.
And this is where the FBI's role shifts dramatically. They weren't just investigating a robbery anymore. They were in a race against time to preserve a life. They were monitoring the plot through their surveillance. They knew about the hit.
So they have to move, and they have to move fast.
The clock is ticking. The case goes from a financial crime to a potential homicide.
I just have to circle back for a second on Gantt's mindset here. He's not an idiot. He ran a vault. He understands security. How does he convince himself that Chambers, a guy he barely knows, a friend of a friend, is going to just hold $17 million for him?
It's the question at the heart of the whole story, isn't it? And I think it comes back to the psychology of desperation we touched on earlier. You have to remember Gantt's situation. Bad marriage, low wages, feeling invisible.
So he's not thinking rationally, he's thinking emotionally. The plan didn't have to be good, it just had to be an exit.
Exactly. The plan didn't have to be waterproof. It just had to be an exit door. And once Ghantt stepped through that door, once he loaded that van, he had zero leverage. He was pot committed, to use a poker term. He was all in.
He couldn't go back.
He couldn't go back. And he couldn't take the money with him to Mexico because of customs. He forced himself to believe the lie because the alternative was realizing he had just ruined his life for literally nothing. It's cognitive dissonance on a multi-million-dollar scale.
So Section 7, the takedown. It's March 1998, about 5 months after the heist. The FBI knows a hit is planned. They know where Ghantt is.
They do. They tracked him down through a recorded phone call. Ghantt called someone from Mexico, and the FBI was able to trace that call and pinpoint his location.
Wow.
On March 1st, 1998, FBI agents coordinated with the Mexican police. They arrested David Ghantt at Playa del Carmen near Cancun.
Was he relieved? I mean, I imagine being arrested was better than being murdered by a hitman.
Given the circumstances, it very likely saved his life. The very next day, the dominoes fell back in North Carolina. Stephen and Michelle Chambers, Kelly Campbell, and 4 others were arrested.
The whole crew.
The whole primary crew. On March 12th, a Charlotte grand jury indicted 8 co-conspirators. The charges were bank larceny and, of course, money laundering.
And the money laundering charge was specifically because of how they spent the money, right?
Yeah.
The houses, the cars, the Velvet Elvis.
Correct. Spending stolen funds is a form of laundering. You are converting illegal proceeds into assets. But the dragnet went wider than just the main crew. This is what's really interesting. 24 people were convicted in total.
24 people? How do you get to 24 people from a single van heist?
It shows how the money contaminated everyone it touched. 9 relatives and friends were charged with money laundering simply because they co-signed for safe deposit boxes that were used to store the cash.
So they just helped hide the money?
The prosecutors argued that they should have known the money was obtained illegally. You don't just co-sign a box for your cousin, who suddenly has stacks and stacks of cash without asking some questions.
And it wasn't just relatives?
No. Even Chambers' attorney, a man named Jeff Guller, was found guilty of money laundering. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison.
The lawyer went to jail. That's rare.
He did. It's a stark reminder that even the legal defense can get pulled in if they cross the line from representation into participating in the concealment of the crime.
Yeah.
He accepted fees that were clearly proceeds from the robbery.
That's incredible. So let's talk about the sentences for the main players. How much time did they get?
Stephen Chambers, the mastermind, received 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. He was also fined more than $3.5 million.
And Ghantt, the man who actually took the money and became the fugitive.
Ghantt received 7 years in prison and was fined $26,000. He was released in 2006.
That's interesting. The guy who did the physical act got less time than the guy who planned it.
It reflects the cooperation Ghantt eventually gave to the FBI and the fact that Chambers was clearly the ringleader who also plotted a murder. The murder plot added a lot of weight to his sentence.
What about Michelle Chambers?
Michelle Chambers actually got a harsher sentence than Gantt's 7 years and 8 months, in part because she violated her bond conditions while awaiting trial.
And the big question, the money. Did they get it all back?
Most of it. The FBI did an incredible job tracking it down. They confirmed that more than 88% of the stolen cash was located or accounted for.
88%. That still leaves a pretty big gap.
It does. More than $2 million is still missing to this day.
That is a lot of loose change.
Indeed. Whether it's spent on things they couldn't trace, hidden somewhere no one ever found, or just lost in the chaos remains a mystery.
Section 8. Cultural impact and legacy. This story didn't just fade away after the trial. It became a bit of a legend.
It became a punchline, honestly. The Hillbilly Heist narrative really took hold. The media portrayal was relentless. America's Most Wanted aired an episode within days of the robbery.
I remember that. There was a poignant moment where Gantt's wife appeared on the show pleading for him to contact them, saying, "No matter what, we do love you."
A really difficult position for her to be in. But the story's absurdity just made it ripe for satire. Local radio stations in Charlotte had parody songs mocking them, like Marvin, the Loomis Caper.
And Hollywood eventually came calling, which was inevitable.
It was. The comedy film Masterminds was released in 2016. It starred Zach Galifianakis as Ghantt, Kristen Wiig as Campbell, and Owen Wilson as Chambers.
When you have Zach Galifianakis playing you in a movie, you know your story has reached a certain level of absurdity.
It absolutely solidified the story in the public mind as a comedy of errors rather than a gritty crime drama, which in many ways it was.
There were also books written.
Yes, Heist, by Jeff Diamond, a journalist who covered the case extensively, and David Ghantt himself later co-wrote a book, The Book of Dave, about his path after the robbery.
And where are they now?
Well, they've all served their time. Chambers was released in 2006. In a 2009 interview with the Associated Press, he described himself as changed and a retired criminal.
A retired criminal. I guess that's an accurate job title on a resume.
It is what it is.
So, bringing it all home as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the ultimate takeaway here?
For me, it's a story about the weight of cash.
Yeah.
Both literal and metaphorical. They stole $17 million, but they didn't have the infrastructure, mentally, emotionally, or logistically, to handle it.
It exposed all their flaws immediately, the greed, the lack of foresight, the impatience. It wasn't the theft that caught them. They pulled off the theft.
They did. They walked out with the money. It was the velvet Elvis. It was the "don't worry, it's not drug money" comment. It was the complete inability to just be quiet and wait.
And we still have that lingering $2 million out there somewhere, ghost of the crime.
The imperfect crime.
So here's a provocative question for you to mull over as we sign off. If you had somehow pulled this off, if you were David Ghantt, sitting in Mexico with $50,000 in your pocket and $17 million sitting in a friend's shed back home, would you have trusted them? Would you have trusted anyone on earth to hold on to a fortune that big while you were powerless to stop them from spending it, or worse, turning on you?
That is the ultimate test of trust, isn't it? And one I don't think many relationships, criminal or otherwise, would pass.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Loomis Fargo robbery.
Until next time.
Stay curious.